Oh, yeah. It is time for my favorite part of the week. Um, I hope you don't hate it too much.
The week or this hour?
Unreported.
Yeah.
Your responsibilities. I mean, I know you feel. I mean, it's a job to keep up on the news the way that we have to do this. That's one thing. But also, as you have felt and I've felt and everybody's felt in recent weeks, on certain issues, doing a new show like this and especially taking generally radical positions on major issues puts you in an emotional place that's not always fun or comfortable, and sometimes a lot worse than that. So yeah, I mean, there are costs to this thing. And I've been this issue has been interesting in a lot of ways and unusual for me. I mean, anybody who knows me knows that I've always had very powerful feelings about war, and that's been my issue since I was a kid. And but I think I have felt more powerfully about this one than any other, even more than Iraq. And we've talked about all the reasons for that. I think that all the specific circumstances of this, I think for most people, I think it's putting them in the similar position of, we've never seen anything like this, and not something carried out by basically our government. But what I have been feeling, in addition to the, I don't know, it's not sadness. I don't know what is the feeling you see when you see a 3-year-old girl with her limbs torn off, lying in the street. I don't know what that is. It's I don't even know. It's everything bad. I don't know. It's all the worst feelings at once maximized. In addition to that feeling, I have felt like rushes of good feelings for people and we've talked about this too, previously either disdained or pretty much hated, meaning the left. A lot of people on the left have been my comrades for the last 7 weeks and always have been on this issue. And, I've been walking around thinking a lot lately, gosh, I get, the left, I suppose, is right on at least one issue. And I've been thinking, like, what other issue? And then I think, my God, and does this mean that I'm wrong on this? Because it can't.
Yeah, last week I had a clip of Oakland City Council when they were talking about their resolution to denounce Hamas, but also, what was the specific resolution? They had a resolution in favor of the civilians in Gaza, but somebody wanted to sneak in some anti-Hamas language, and the testimonies were very, very radical and unhinged. And I'm like, are these the people that we really want to side with? The people that are still wearing masks, the people that use the most emotional identitarian arguments?
I do want to say actually something. I want to be clear about what my position's on this. I don't talk about this issue in the terms that they did at that meeting, the Oakland. And I don't even take a couple of the positions they take in that meeting specifically. I'm thinking, for one, I think one of the things that people found particularly crazy was one woman, I think, said that Hamas is a legitimate resistance organization or movement. That I think that was the most controversial thing. But there's several things sort of along those lines. So to me, I actually think they're basically not legitimate, not having had elections since 2016, ruling over a society that's half children, exactly how much what's it called? Authority has been granted to you by the people of Gaza. I mean, some, sure. But anyway, but it's a legitimate, I think it's a legitimate position to take. I mean, meaning it's arguable, it's defensible, it's absolutely defensible. In fact, the pro-Zionists, I mean, the pro-Israel people should be agreeing with that, right? Because don't they want to say that the civilians are responsible for this, for Hamas? I mean, but they do say that.
Yeah,
So,
you can't have it
why
both
is it
ways.
controversial to say that? I mean, legitimate meaning, of course, idiots hear that and they think it means good. That's just what that means is good, legitimate. No, it just means that it is vested with due authority by its constituents, right? Or is it just some gang, which I've mostly considered it to be like a gang, very similar to the turn of the 20th century big gangs that ran the cities. It's actually quite analogous. The more I think about it, similar size in terms of area and population, actually, and the way they carried, and in a certain sense, they were surrounded by an external power, right? Which was the federal government that was often at odds with them and basically broke them down over time, just not through bombs, but but then more importantly, like operated similar to Hamas, as I understand it, which is that they provided a lot of essential services, basically acted like a shadow or parallel government, and in many ways were competing with the legitimate government on those things, and often just won. They provided like fire services better than the government did, and so people granted them authority, entitled. They were entitled. They were given entitlement by the people generally. There was a general sentiment in the Lower East Side of New York that the Tammany mob should rule. And they gave out jobs and they controlled a lot of the jobs and a lot of the economy and infrastructure of their neighborhoods. Very similar. Yeah, they never held elections, of course, or did, but they were all rigged, whatever. But was Tammany, were all the big city machines, then Chicago especially, were they legitimate? Yeah, I mean, look at the people. Look at what the people had to say about them. Not everyone loved them, but they were quite popular, and that's why they lasted for so long. And in fact, that's why it required basically a concerted campaign by progressives and the US federal government over about 30, 40 years. That's what the progressive era is about, by the way. It's a war between the federalists, the federal power, and the progressives, who are all about making the United States one uniform nation with one culture. A war between them and the city machines or mobs, whatever you want to say, that basically ran the big cities in the United States. They were also had an immigrant base that were considered to be foreigners and alien and weird and radical and dangerous and violent. The Jews and Italians and earlier Irish who lived in those cities and those places that were run by the big city machines. What was their reputation then? And by the way, a lot of that was earned. Jews and Italians and Irish back in the day acted quite a bit like Hamas. In fact, damn near identical. In fact, one could say they were more brutal in some. They set off bombs in civilian areas. They shot civilians. They raped women. They did all kinds of shit. They had the biggest gangs in the country. The Jews, the Italians, and the Irish in this country had the biggest gangs, and they were really nasty people. And the big city machines ruled the cities in which they operated. Really similar. So, and by the way, the gangsters of the time in the 20s and 30s during Prohibition especially were the most popular celebrities in America, meaning people actually admired them. And so the Hollywood movies of that time actually had one of the big genres was the gangster genre, in which they showed the gangster from a sympathetic point of view. They were the heroes. The only time in Hollywood history in which gangsters have been portrayed as a hero was in that era because the people thought so. So yeah, legitimate. Those gangs and gangsters and big city machines were absolutely legitimate. And that was the craziest thing that was said at the Oakland City Council. This is often what I hear. It's like when I hear people say stuff like this, I don't actually think it's even radical to say that they're legitimate. I mean, unless you just want to take the idiotic interpretation and say the legitimate means good. So I didn't endorse anybody just now, any gang or gangster or anything. I just said that they had an organic connection to the people they ruled.
You're just making a historical observation. That's all.
Well, yes, and I'm also, I mean, it's argument number 9,223 for why we should call for a ceasefire too. I mean, like, and why we should end the blockade of Gaza, end the siege, tear down the wall, grant Palestinians full civil rights, evict all the illegal settlers who are living on occupied land. Yeah, and then we can talk. Until then, until those conditions are met, I'm not interested in negotiating or talking about anything. I mean, those have to be met. Everyone agrees those are illegal, violent, unjust, grotesque policies of the state of Israel, and every one of them can be reversed. You have to give these people civil rights. I have heard libertarians, some friends of mine, I'm sorry to say, give lengthy, considered arguments as to why Palestinians should not be granted civil rights, which is simply the argument is simply that if we grant them civil rights, they'll use them to slaughter Jews because that's all they want to do.
Can I give you some pushback on the ceasefire notion a little
Yeah,
bit?
of course, man.
I don't see it being politically useful to call for a ceasefire when it's very obvious that neither parties are interested in upholding one, and they've shown that throughout all of their history. Like there was a humanitarian ceasefire like last week, and you know, Israel is blaming Hamas for the shooting at the bus stop for violating that, and then if you look, there's been bombings in the West Bank and there's been bombings in Gaza during that ceasefire being in place. So it just seems like just a meaningless, like bureaucratic gesture, I guess, to declare a ceasefire.
Well, because it has no meaning in practical terms.
Yes.
That it will not be an actual ceasefire. Well, I mean, that's not true in that there have been multiple ceasefires in the past in which, the main fighting stopped and then someone broke the ceasefire a week or two later. And then there's been a series of broken cease. I mean, there's that. It does save a lot of lives. It's certainly not the answer. No one is saying it's the answer. To me, I just laid out what the answer is. You have to give these people the rights that everyone else gets. That's it. And then you can talk about fucking means of resistance and, what is unjust and whether you condemn Hamas. No, I mean, you gotta, hello. I mean, this is South Africa. This is apartheid South Africa. This is the Jim Crow South. Look at it. Like there's no doubt with other, in some ways, worse conditions thrown in, right? The United States never bombed black neighborhood once in Tulsa. Only once did they bomb a black neighborhood.
Man, I hate to be the racist here, but if you want to make those comparisons, look at what happened to South Africa after they abolished apartheid.
I was thinking about this just today. And I don't quite get why the pro-Palestine side is not making this comparison more, because actually, and I'm willing to go with the whole thing about rape too, because that's a part of it. Yeah, no, it's all fucking true. And in fact, I knew at the time in the 90s when I was a part of that movement, or the 80s, when I was a part of the end apartheid movement, meaning like I marched in the streets and all my friends were sort of part of it, generally speaking. I knew at the time, I was like, these reports of rape of white women by black men in South Africa are probably true. Makes sense to me. And I've said the same. We said it on here, right? Or I said it earlier, many months ago on this show. Didn't I talk about lynchings and how it's basically the idea that all those men who were lynched in the United States were innocent is like almost, I mean, in terms of percentage, if I had to put all my money on something, I mean, I would say more than 90% were actually guilty of rape. And and there's all sorts of just evidence and arguments for that. And it's just so obvious to me. But
that I read To Kill a Mockingbird in elementary school. I know that all of that stuff's bullshit.
We know that all black men are really Sidney Poitier, who is just the safest, most kindly, genteel, upright Negro you could ever meet. He was the original Barack Obama. And if anybody wants to get a sense of what racial liberalism is, which is that's the racial regime we live under, the dominant ideology of race in this country, go look, although it's changed a bit lately, but this is basically what we have been required to believe. Go look at Sidney Poitier's, all of his movies in the 1950s and 60s, every single one of them. The Defiant Ones is the one I used to teach to show this, but he is the perfect gentleman. He speaks the king's English. He's educated. He's well groomed. He has proper manners. He dresses nicely. You would never know he'd ever met another black person. He is the ultimate assimilated Negro. And so that was what the civil rights movement built itself around, was around making black people that, so that they could get into society and gain their civil rights. That was Martin Luther King's entire strategy. Palestinians have never had a Martin Luther King. Part of the strategy, if you want to assimilate, you kind of have to be nonviolent, right? If you're asking to be included fully, to be like basically immersed in the society, which is what the civil rights movement was asking for, you can't be violent, because these people will never allow you in their bedrooms or in their houses or in their neighborhoods. Palestinians never had this, but they never had the interest in being assimilated into Israeli society for all sorts of obvious reasons. Therefore, violence was always an option, because they never gave a shit about being a part of Israel, unlike the civil rights movement, which that was all about, becoming part of the United States, our captors. They captured us and brought us here and enslaved us, and now we want to be a part of their family. Ceasefire. Yeah, or were we arguing something else?
That's what I was arguing, is that I'm just unbelievably cynical on this issue. I don't think a ceasefire will really accomplish anything.
I want to say something about your cynicism, which is that we need a lot more of it on this issue. We need more cynical people. And when I say cynical, I mean someone like you on this, who is dispassionate, but interested and concerned enough to develop a position, because I think you understand that there are real stakes, even for you, who's just an American, not as big as like people whose hearts are in the issue, but as I've been saying, and I said earlier, I mean, I have felt feelings that I haven't felt in a long time about politics. Several good friends of mine, it's been a little dicey in the last 6 or 7 weeks because of this issue, which is weird in a way. I'm trying to think if it should be weird, but yeah, this issue has this tendency to do that. But we need more people to have like a cold view of it, because you're smarter. You're going to be smarter.
Mm-hmm. Well, with the personal friends thing, you can't fault your friends for falling for a psyop. Like, we've all been there. And you just, I don't know, you just got to kill them with kindness in some way, because that's all that's happening, is that they're operating under an alternate reality, and they're falling for the emotional propaganda that's been blasted at them, and that's where they're operating from.
Yeah. I'm one of the things I'm sort of constantly thinking about is how isolated the pro-Israel people are becoming. And especially as the war, and now that they've resumed fighting and they killed 700 people on the first day, and it's going to continue. And so like every day, I mean, Jake Tapper, did you see that when he was interviewing Mark Regev, who's Netanyahu's top advisor guy? Jake Tapper is unhappy with them now. He's kind of grossed out, was how I would put his response to what Regev was saying, and about what's been going on generally. He's disgusted. I think the words, he looks disgusted, and the way he was talking sounded like he's disgusted with what Israel's doing. And Jake Tapper was the guy who flew to Tel Aviv on October 8th and had a studio set up in Tel Aviv, and was broadcasting from Tel Aviv and Jerusalem and South Israel and He was Israel's chief propagandist globally for weeks. and now Jake Tapper is folding. So like the journalists and people on Twitter and podcasters who are pro-Israel, the public intellectuals who are pro-Israel, I don't think they know this, because I think they look at each other and they feel like it's okay, because there's definitely like, I don't know, 100 of them, maybe, public figures who are pro-Israel, something like 100, 200, maybe more. I mean, in terms of people with audiences, something like that. I don't think they realize that they're all alone, except it's them and half of the U.S. government. The U.S. government's not even united on this. The State Department has open rebellions going on. It's incredible. Like, they're just so numerically. I mean, the number of people in the United States who are pro-Israel at this point or opposed to a ceasefire, you can count them. I mean, it's incredible. There's so few. So you were going to say?
I was going to say every single member of the House of Representatives, except for Thomas Massie and Rashida Tlaib, who voted present, and even have the guts to vote no on this, expanded officially their definition of anti-Zionism. I mean, of anti-Semitism to include anti-Zionism in 2 resolutions.
I know. I didn't look at who voted how, but did Ilhan Omar vote for that shit?
And
why did she not vote no? I mean, she certainly did not vote no, which is what? That's like, she gets this stuff more than anything else. And I mean, AOC I could see, because she actually voted for the Iron Dome for Israel. But Ilhan Omar, did she vote for this insane?
I'll man, check. Even though didn't show up to work, or she voted yes.
It's just a resolution, right? It's not. Yeah. Still, like, I can't recall a resolution by Congress that has been this offensive to me. And it is simply, it's the intellectual dishonesty of it that makes me crazy. It's not so much the being pro-Israel. That's what the U.S. government has done my entire life, or since I was 2 years old. No, it's the conflation of anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. How dare you? It's just grotesque.
You could go to congress.gov and read the resolution. It's 1 page. And number 4 on the resolution clearly and firmly states that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. In no uncertain terms, that exact line.
I have a rabbi they can talk to about that. Mm-hmm. And it's not just Rabbi Shapiro, who was on my show, and everyone should watch that episode. It's gotten tremendous reviews for good reason. That is the one. If you want the most fundamental undercutting of Zionism, watch that show. Watch him. That's the one. I mean, Israel has no leg to stand on after you listen to his argument. It's so grotesque. He's not the only one. There was just a rally. Yes, it was mostly, I think, Satmars, and I guess it was in Brooklyn. I don't know if you saw it. It was like, I mean, they're wild. I mean, it's a crazy, wild culture to us, but the Satmar Hasidim in Brooklyn, who are anti-Zionist. But it was this like huge, giant auditorium of, I'd say, 10 to 20,000, something like that. Maybe 5 to 10,000. I don't know. Many thousands of Hasids jumping up and down, chanting something about free Palestine, and like, that's just Brooklyn, and that's just the Satmars. There is, in fact, I think Rabbi Shapiro is not even part of it. He's not. I think he's his own thing. He's not part of a particular sect. I don't think. He's just his own. And I think there are multiple rabbinical intellectuals who are absolutely anti-Zionist. Here's a statistic. 1/3 of the population of Jerusalem, excuse me, let me refine that. 1/3 of the Jewish population of Jerusalem is anti-Zionist. The Haredim, they're anti-Zionist and always have been. Here's another one. The rabbi of Jerusalem, when the Zionists showed up, Rabbi Sonnenfeld, when the 20s and 30s, he was a rabbi of Jerusalem. he was anti-Zionist and begged for the Arab countries to colonize Palestine instead, because he preferred living under Arab rule than under Zionist or British rule. Rabbi Sonnenfeld, who was a survivor of the pogroms in Russia. The whole thing's such a fraud. It's just wild. It's like Judaism is more than 2,000 years old, and this joint is 150 years old. And it was thought up by one dude in Austria who was a totally assimilated, secular, non-religious Jew named Theodor Herzl. He thought it up, and they all put it into practice in 1897. 125 years old now? The idea of a state of Israel in Palestine is only 125 years old. And they act like it's some sacred thing and where is it in the Torah? No. Like there's nothing in the Bible that says the Jews must have a state in this part of the world. Nothing. There's zero biblical justification for this thing. That's the other thing that's so infuriating to me. The intellectual dishonesty of all these people who are pro-Israel. Oh, Lord of mercy.
Real quick, I want to thank Eric Sean for the 5 and his cynicism. He also doesn't understand right-wingers' obsession with Israel and doesn't understand why liberals fetishize Palestine.
Well, I can explain. I mean, this is a quick class. I mean, basically, but for the Christian piece of it, the right-wing piece of it, it's a Christian story. And it's actually very fascinating and actually very revealing, again, about what Zionism is. Before Theodor Herzl, there were many people in the United States and in Britain who did have the idea that the Jews should have a homeland. They weren't specific about it being in Palestine. These people who called for a Jewish homeland were Christian evangelicals. And they said, Jews should have a homeland because that will precipitate the second coming, in which all will be made right, meaning Jews will essentially be abolished one way or the other, and no longer will be. So Zionism in its original formulation was anti-Semitic, for sure, anti-Jewish, for sure. And it's interesting that Herzl came along 50 or 60 years later and took it up and made it into this pro-Jewish thing. It sure doesn't look to be pro-Jewish, considering that 16,000 Jews have died in the fucking place since it was founded. Been killed, I mean. But so that's the Christian piece. And the Christians ever since, Christian evangelicals have taken up the cause. And that kind of increased a lot in the 1980s and 1990s. And I believe that was a concerted effort by AIPAC, the Israel lobby, to court those evangelicals because they became so powerful under Reagan. In the Reagan 80s, the evangelicals became like a major political force, and AIPAC sort of said, oh, if we get these people, we can remind them of who the original Zionists were. So cynical. And they'll help us out, and we'll get a lot of politicians to support Israel. And that's exactly what happened. And you see that movement continued to grow. And I think what then happened was in the 90s and then especially 2000s, with the war on terror and everybody hating Arabs so much. And boy, did we hate Arabs in the 2000s. I'm sure we can all remember. And so evangelical Christians were among the biggest Arab haters of all. And so all these images of these Arab terrorists and 9/11 merged beautifully with this love of Israel. So they really started to understand why they should love Israel, because Israel was killing them Arabs, man. If you want to kill some Arabs, you need to give some guns to Israel, because those crazy motherfuckers will do it for you. And that's exactly, I just described U.S.-Israel relations for the last 56 years. So.
Well, you brought up Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro, and with him, it's pretty obvious, like his argument is pretty airtight, and I can see why any religious Jew would make that argument, that Judaism is a set of religious practices, and associating it with a race or ethnicity or a political agenda is completely an insult to the religion itself.
And
And
racist.
yeah,
And stupidly racist. I mean, it's just, yeah.
but for other religious conservatives, I recommend people follow Sensus Fidelum, the conservative Catholic, the traditionalist Catholic page on YouTube. They have videos that are like 5 years old about the heresy of Christian Zionism, and they let pretty much your arguments exactly about Theodore Herzl and why it's a complete invention and has nothing to do with the Christian faith. And our friend
Rabbi
Johnson on
Rabbi
Counterflow.
Shapiro, yeah, Rabbi Shapiro was killing me when he was talking about Herzl, and I haven't confirmed any of this, but I'm sure it's true because I mean, Rabbi Shapiro's written books. He's been around for a long time. He would have been cross-checked on this. Herzl, he said, had a Christmas tree every year, and was explicitly, basically anti-Semitic. He, but yeah, I mean that was actually so that I think Rabbi Shapiro's argument, I think it is essentially, yeah, that Herzl was anti-Semitic, and that's why the Christian evangelical idea of Zionism appealed to him, because he wanted to obliterate anybody who seemed Jewish, because he was a thoroughly assimilated Jew who lived in Vienna, which was a place at that time in the 1890s where Jews were like living their largest, and doing extremely well, and very, very assimilated and very powerful and very much a part of that society. Yeah. So anyway, that's the right wing side. That's at least the basis of it. And I think just sort of anti-Arabism, which is huge, been huge on the right. Trump, all the Trump people, they hate Arabs. That's like their second or third cause, right? It's like after hating Mexicans and hating liberals, I don't know, they hate the Arabs big time. So that's why they like Israel, the right wing. The left wing. So this is a story that I know well because I am a part of it, and this is like my story with it. So I'm odd in that have I said this about my parents' organization, about my Palestinian history, my pro-Palestine history? It goes all the way back. So people can Google this guy, Tony Cliff, who was the founder of the Socialist Workers' Party in the UK, and their sister organization, essentially the same organization, the International Socialists, was my parents' organization in the United States. Trotskyist, radical, revolutionary weirdo fucks. I renounce basically everything they stood for and have for my entire adult life. However, Tony Cliff, and they were pretty, not huge in number, but these were very influential people, intellectuals, etc. So this is not like an insignificant group of people. Beginning of the 1960s, this is when they were around, when I was a little kid. Tony Cliff was a Jew who was born in Palestine, in what's called British Mandate Palestine, before Israel, in the 1920s, I think he was born. No, 1900s, I think he was born. And he, I think this is right, was basically the first person, this is important, first person on the left anywhere in the world to make Palestine a political issue and to oppose not just Israeli policies, but to oppose Zionism. I believe that Tony Cliff, and this is so my parents' organization, they were the first people to make anti-Zionism a left-wing cause, because before then, right after World War II, after the Holocaust, etc., the whole world and certainly the left were all about the Jews as victims, and the sympathy for them and the hatred of the Nazis and all. And so Israel was able to coast, at least in American popular opinion, and because we weren't funding them yet, by the way, we didn't give them much in money or weapons yet, for those first 20 years, the American left was cool with Israel until my parents' organization came along, and they were the ones who said, no, this is a settler, colonial, apartheid, violent regime, et cetera, et cetera. And so, yeah, I literally have always been around and they're all Jews. I've been around anti-Zionist Jews, including my parents, my entire life. And then I knew their comrades, and I grew up around these people, and yada, yada. So But it is an important to think about. I've never seen anyone make that point, that that's when anti-Zionism became a left-wing issue, was when the Trotskyists in the 1960s made it so. I'm pretty sure that's right. The Trotskyists were always kind of like on the leading edge of what the radical left was doing. So it makes sense. But yeah, Tony still but he was right about this, as I think the left is right now in general. I think they're right about it. So yeah. But I want to get back to this thing about the isolation of the pro-Israel side. Because this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where it's coming to a moment where something's got to break. Something big's got to break. I mean, I think that's where we're headed. Alistair Crook, who I'm going to try to get on the show, former MI6 negotiator with Palestinians and the Israelis, knows these people all up and down. He makes the argument that this is wild too. The argument that what October 7th and the subsequent events are, for both sides, for Israel and Hamas, is a revolutionary war. That both sides are revolutionary. And when he said this, it clicked in my head. If you know anything about the Netanyahu government since last year, I mean, even pro-Israel people hate them. I mean, even pro-Israel people understand that these are fanatics who have openly called for the expulsion of all Palestinians from the land of Israel. These are cabinet members. Okay. So like, they're revolutionaries. They're radicals. That's revolutionary. That's radical position. And they control the government. And for Hamas too, because of, and the way he put it, it was quite amazing. Like, even pro-Palestinian people don't really understand the provocations that were happening that caused this. So the attacks, the reason they called it the Al-Aqsa flood, the attack, was because of these just outrageous attacks basically on the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is the third holiest site in Islam. I'm trying to think of what the equivalent would be in Catholicism, the third holiest, I don't know.
Notre Dame. One of the great monasteries in Spain, or a
yeah, it's number 3. It's number 3. It's of course on the Temple Mount, holiest site in the world. I mean, it's a big deal to these people. I mean, Ariel Sharon walked in there once to just who's a known terrorist who like massacred lots of people, and became the head of Israel. And some guy brought a dog in, and some guy brought a pig in, and like to the mosque. And then the settlers just rampaged on it this year. They had an armed insurrection into the fucking mosque. These settlers are absolute fanatics. They're just straight up fascists. Again, like even all the pro-Israel people I know, all of them, pro-Israel people hate those settlers and call them fascists because that's just what they are. I mean, like, those people need police action. I mean, if there is a UN, if there's such a thing as any kind of world government or police organization, I'm not calling for one, this is who it should be stopping. Because they're also causing all of this stuff. The way that they basically foreclosed the two-state option by taking all this land that belonged to the Palestinians and building all these high-rise apartments on it. They made it so that Hamas and company and the Palestinians generally had nothing left. And therefore you're surprised that they're freaking out on you and blowing themselves up. So anyway, the left, why do we care so much? So I go back all the way, and I mean, that means you just heard about all of it from the beginning. And I think that's what bothers me the most about like friends of mine who are pro-Israel on this. Like, they're very smart. I mean, I don't agree with them, but I think their analysis of what's happened is, perfectly reasonable and rational and intelligent, because these are very, very smart people who do politics for a living, right? but they didn't know anything about this beforehand. This is a new issue to them. And so they had to catch up and read about it and stuff. And it's not like, they found out what the Nakba was, and they found out about what Zionism was, and they found out about all the basics and the occupation, etc. But I think they didn't, because of that, they didn't cultivate any feelings for either side. But I think that they simply now see, because these are also very rational, I'm not going to say autistic, but, very rational minded, literal minded, often political types. They see Israel as simply the more rational actors because they dress like us and talk like us, and their cities look like ours, and their women are hot, and they conduct violence through their militaries and their states rather than through terrorism. And so they just sort of take the side of Israel because they see, and they also hate the left. And so they see that this Palestinian shit is so nasty and dirty and violent and gross, and it's so left wing, and the woke loves them, and they wear keffiyehs, and that's so strange, and face masks, and it's also alien. That's another part of it. It's such an alien culture to people in America, and I understand that, but take a second just to think about it. Anyway, so I mean, one of my classmates when I was in college, when I knew nothing about this stuff really, except just a few things my parents had told me about it. One of my, this girl I went to college with, she had a Palestinian flag in her dorm room. And I was like, what's up with that? And she said, this is in 1987. Okay. So this is right when the first Intifada is starting. But basically, this is a long time ago. And she said she had just visited there, and it had changed her life, and she was committed to this forever. It has a power because, if we're right, it is all the bad things in one. It's it's settler colonialism. It's illegal military occupation. It's racial apartheid. It's the denial of basic civil rights to a population to determine by race. And it's been a goddamn nonstop kinetic war, because there's not been a single year in which someone hasn't been killed since 1947. Not a single year in which someone wasn't killed on one side or the other. Almost always Palestinians, or mostly, overwhelmingly Palestinians in terms of the numbers. But yeah, so when you grow up with it and you hear about it, for all these decades, you've heard about every outrage, every atrocity. Although the second Intifada, which was the first few years of the century, of the millennium, basically started in 2000, lasted for, depends on how you count it, for several years. And this is when I started to teach about it and started to research it. That broke the back of the left, of a lot of the left on this. It broke the back of the left in Israel. And people should understand that there used to be a huge left wing in Israel that actually many times basically controlled the government, that were all about a two-state solution, finding peace with the Palestinians, giving them the occupied territories back, giving them sovereignty in their own land, major portions of what was then the state of Israel. That was a mainstream position. Most politicians actually held, or many politicians actually held it in Israel for a time. The second Intifada, after the Oslo peace accords broke down, when people started blowing themselves up on buses in Tel Aviv and in cafes in Jerusalem and on the streets in the cities in Israel, and just killing random civilians by the dozens or scores, which I maintain, and I've said this all along, I think that was worse than October 7th, actually. And I'm talking about just objectively. When we find out exactly what happened on October 7th, I'll bet you that the violence in the Second Intifada was worse. There was just, I just know that there was I'm sure that there's way more indiscriminate killing of civilians by Hamas than October 7th. I actually think that the deliberate killing of civilians on October 7th was largely, my guess is largely rogue, largely guys not following orders. But Intifada, for Second Intifada, these were suicide bombers. And this is one of the reasons Sam Harris became Sam Harris, was this particular thing. The suicide bombers, they were recruited, trained, equipped, and sent out by Hamas and the other armed resistance movements. There's no doubt about that. They took credit for it. Yeah, and I had a friend from Columbia grad school who was living in Tel Aviv with his wife and three kids who I knew. But just, it was horrific. I don't know, just as bad as bombing a building full of civilians. It's equally bad to me. That broke the back. The Israeli left disappeared when that happened. They no longer believed that Palestinians were acting in good faith, that Palestinians would allow for any Jewish state. And I remember when I was teaching at the time, and I said to my classes, I said, even though I'm basically on the side of Palestine, I think that the Netanyahu, the right wing, the so-called fanatic right-wing crazies who are the Netanyahu government now, I said, I think they're right. I think they're right. I think overwhelmingly Palestinians, the people, I can't prove this, gave up on it too and are simply anti-Zionist. Now, that does not mean that they want to kill all the Jews. It doesn't even mean they want to kill any Jew. In fact, I am convinced, I'm positive that the vast majority of Palestinians have no interest in killing Jews at all.
Well,
the vast majority.
It depends on your definition of Jew. If your definition of Jew is somebody who practices the religion of Judaism, that's a secondary point. If your definition of Jew is a settler who lives in Israel, then they probably want to kill you.
Their Jewishness is absolutely incidental to Palestinians. It doesn't matter if they were Christian, Jewish, or even Muslim for that matter. They could be Shia Muslims doing exactly the same thing against the Sunnis in Gaza. Right. So, and they would hate them just as much. So it's because they're Zionists and occupiers, not Jews. Mm-hmm. All right. I feel like we should take some questions.
Well, we did. I mean, that whole spurg was from a super chat. So appreciation for that. But I do want to talk about the debate last night and some domestic issues. There were some revealing moments in the debate.
Can we play some of it? Because it'll definitely lighten the mood. It's very funny.
Okay.
There's some moments in there that are like, I mean, I give Vivek a lot of credit for putting on quite a show.
For me, this was Vivek's best moment, I think, in him solidifying himself as the outsider candidate.
It's entertaining as hell.
Yeah. This is where he listed off a litany of issues that no other Republican, including Donald Trump, are willing to touch.
I think the real enemy is not Donald Trump. It's not even Joe Biden. It is the deep state that at least Donald Trump attempted to take on. And if you want somebody who's going to speak truth to power, then vote for somebody who's going to speak the truth to you. Why am I the only person on the stage, at least, who can say that January 6th now does look like it was an inside job? That the government lied to us for 20 years about Saudi Arabia's involvement in 9/11? That the Great Replacement theory is not some grand right-wing conspiracy theory, but a basic statement of the Democratic Party's platform. That the 2020 election was indeed stolen by big tech. That the 2016 election, the one that Trump won for sure, was also one that was stolen from him by the national security establishment that actually put up the Trump-Russia collusion hoax that they knew was false. There's a reason why I'm the only person on the stage who can say these things. That's what it's going to take, not people who are licking his boots one time and now Monday morning quarterbacking him and criticizing him when it's convenient.
So this is the second time that a candidate in my entire lifetime, and I think in presidential history, has explicitly advocated for the interests of white people. And for the second time, it's somebody of Asian descent.
Who's the first?
Andrew Yang. He talked about how the opioid crisis was disaffectionately affecting white people.
Well, I just want to say on behalf of all of us, thank you, Vivek. And I'm going to pronounce your name correctly now since you're on our side. It's about time, dude. Someone stood up for us. You know? Well, it's funny. A year ago, I probably would have said that passionately. And I mean, I do feel that way intellectually, politically. I'm there, but I'm just not in the mood at the moment. But it's true. I mean, when white people get gunned down, unarmed, innocent white people get gunned down by the police, no one cares. The media doesn't report it. They started a little bit, like in the last year or two, but no, for a long time, the most grotesque examples of police shootings were never reported. Not that Vivek is concerned about that too much, although I think he might. I could actually see him becoming concerned, if I told him about Danny Shaver, or, there's all sorts of white victims of police violence that never got any attention paid to them.
And,
so that's good.
On the January 6th tip, that was the first question that that CNN asked him in the post-debate interview. Like, why are you forwarding this conspiracy theory? Christopher Wray, who was appointed by Trump, the FBI official, says the guy who works for the FBI, the head of the FBI, says it's a conspiracy theory, so it has to be a conspiracy theory. And he gave even more detailed pushback, saying that these are political prisoners, some of which have been driven to suicide, and that Donald Trump himself won't even advocate for these people who he led on.
Yeah, that was like smelling salts when he said that about January 6th. It was like, whoa, on a debate stage, someone is saying this. Although Trump has said it, not on a debate stage, but he certainly said it. Well, I noticed that Vivek is, again, he's not departing from the Trump line at all on anything, except oddly, maybe Saudi Arabia. I don't know about, he said that thing about Saudi Arabia doing 9/11. Trump loves Saudi Arabia and did a huge deal with them, and his son-in-law made a lot of money from them afterward. So I don't know if I'm trying to get at Vivek's strategy. Is he just trying to be the brown Trump?
I think if Trump, one of the convictions passes, or if the RNC in some way takes down his candidacy, for some reason he's not allowed to be a candidate, then he's the front runner, or at least he's the only one speaking to those issues.
Oh.
If he's serious about becoming president.
Okay. I see.
Or he's trying to get in on the RNC, or he's trying to get in on Trump's cabinet potentially.
And what are the numbers right now? I haven't followed this at all in weeks.
I know that Nikki Haley has been rising in the polls. I don't know what it is post-debate. It's Donald Trump ahead by a mile, and then but Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis, and Vivek are like neck and neck at around like 11 to 13% each.
I just realized why they're all so fierce about this, because there's a solid chance number 2 will become the president. Right. Mm-hmm. So, and wait a second. Oh yeah. Right. Yes. Right. So I can see why they're fighting tooth and nail for that, even though they have zero chance of winning, getting whatever isn't 10% good. Like what does DeSantis have? Like,
20? Yeah, they're all like 2,
single
3,
digit,
are all fighting over 10 to 13%.
Right. I mean, I can't stand Vivek. He's just the most grating personality ever. He's, quite high IQ, so he says some interesting and intelligent things, but and I certainly love the wrecking ball approach. And you didn't even show the good stuff. I mean, he went off on Nikki Haley. I mean, real off. And then Chris Christie, boy, he just ran a truck over Chris Christie too. It was wild. He's ruder than Trump, I think it's safe to say.
Well, Trump isn't on that stage. So, I mean, I think Trump was ruder in 2016, and Trump might have been ruder.
I don't know.
In the first debate against Biden.
Yeah, they're similar. I mean, again, he's the brown Trump.
Mm-hmm.
He's the brown, high IQ, autistic Trump.
And he's young.
Yeah. He's the debate club leader, who is Trump. And he's young, right?
Yeah.
God, are they going to put Trump away? Again, I haven't followed this in a few weeks.
One of the convictions, I don't know, Trump was making some progress on. I want to show one of the weirder moments from Nikki Haley. This was her talking about TikTok. And once again, she brings this up, but she had another moment. Yeah.
This is good. This is good.
Yeah.
We really do need to ban TikTok once and for all. And let me tell you why. For every 30 minutes that someone watches TikTok, every day, they become 17% more anti-Semitic, more pro-Hamas based on doing that. We now know that 50% of adults 18 to 25 think that Hamas was warranted in what they did with Israel. That's a problem. When campuses also don't go and protect when they have these rallies and you've got students that are scared, we need to go to these universities and say, if you're not going to protect these students, if you're not going to acknowledge anti-Semitism, we'll take your tax-exempt status away. That'll fix it, and that'll take care of it.
So I was, before I went on TikTok, I was 50% pro-Hamas. And after half an hour, I was 67% pro-Hamas.
I spent 5 hours on TikTok the other day. I'm 170% anti-Semitic.
Oh, shit. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, so it even goes over. You can even have like,
yeah,
you can have more than 100. Uh-huh.
That's
those Chinese, man.
That's girl boss math right there.
That's those Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
Who was I listening to today? Which politician was telling some very important person? What was this? Who was it? Anyway, saying that, noting that October 7th is Putin's birthday. And it was the best gift the dictator in Moscow could ever have gotten. Who was this? It was somebody who actually makes foreign policy. So it was important. I was like, wow, okay.
Oh, yeah. And on the Trump tip, you were talking about that. There's that big Atlantic spread with like 15 different articles by experts talking about how if Trump gets reelected, it'll be worse than the first time. He'll be a total dictator.
Yeah, right. And that thing he said about his first day, he just had that sort of gaffe or whatever about, he was saying his first day he's going to be a dictator.
I don't think that's a gaffe. I think it's just humor, I think.
Yeah, no, I mean, did people, of course they took him seriously as anti-Trump tards always do. They take everything he says literally. That's their thing. I mean, it's not my favorite thing to hear from someone who might be president, you know, but I know Trump and I know what he meant, right? I know the guy and I know what he meant. So plus he just wouldn't be able to for all sorts of reasons. And so it's not a concern. He can't be a dictator. I mean, that's one of the things people often forgot conveniently, is that structurally there was just no way. I mean, with half the society and all the institutions completely against him, he just had no chance, including the military. The military was anti-Trump. They were probably the first people who were anti-Trump. I mean, top of the military.
Yeah, the military is the General Milley's and
Pentagon.
Yeah,
Pentagon. Yeah, the people who don't fight. Yeah, the people who don't fight, they did not like Trump.
And I want to play this next clip too, as evidence for what Nikki Haley was saying might have some truth to it. On TikTok, this clip of Alex Jones on September 10th or September 12th, 2001 went viral.
Word.
And and he basically articulates why I would care about this issue at all. And this is the old Alex Jones that we all loved. But
boom, do it.
That Nazi Sharon has invaded the West Bank. They're slaughtering innocent people. And I'm sick of worshiping Israel. Did you know back in the 1960s they bombed the USS Liberty knowing it was one of our ships because it caught the radio chatter of them killing thousands of Palestinian children during that invasion? And they torpedoed it as they begged for hours on the radio. And LBJ sat there in 63 and let them do it. That's in this Baltimore Sun story. I don't support the Palestinians either. They're all hyped up and psychotic. But Israel's going to get us nuked, always backing them up like this. Israel calls the Palestinians goyim or cattle or dogs or subhuman. They keep them on concentration camps. I got video of them taking Palestinian women's tomatoes they grow and breaking their water containers and stealing. That's why you have this crap. And our children are going to die. We're going to get nuked because of this. Iran's got the nukes now. Syria. We're going to have nuclear war because Israel likes to go around bombing everybody.
Every word. Every word. He's right. You know, he can go on 20-minute tirades in which everything's right. He says everything's right. The nuclear bomb thing, ending, you know, this conflict ending with a nuclear bomb somewhere. I you know, it could go either way. My friend who lives in Tel Aviv, who's a professor at Tel Aviv University, I remember him telling me during the Second Intifada, he said, I know that one day a nuclear bomb will go off in a major city in Israel. He said, I know it. Yeah, why not? I mean, there's clearly, I mean, even people who are sympathetic to Palestinians, whatever, have to acknowledge that there are some people, of course, in the organizations who are fanatics who would like to die. Yeah, definitely. And would like to kill a whole bunch of Israelis, no doubt about it, in other words, who would be willing. I believe there are some people, yes, in the West Bank and Gaza who would like to drop a nuclear bomb in Israel. Yes. Yes. And vice versa. No doubt about it. The difference is that some of the people in Israel who want to drop a bomb on Gaza and the West Bank are in the government, and have Apache warships and one of the top 5 air forces in the world.
Or drop a nuke on Iran, or drop a nuke on Syria, or escalate the war against Russia because it's all one giant axis of evil. There's another Biden clip where he said, that if Russia crosses the border into a NATO ally, that we must respond, invoking his interpretation of Article 5 of the NATO Charter.
Okay, so this is great. I don't need people to have sympathy for Palestinians at all. In fact, that might even cloud the issue. What I need for them to do always, what I need Americans always to do, is to be fucking isolationists. It's all you need to do. It's so easy. It's good for everybody. It's very healthy. It's like eating your Wheaties. It's all American. If you really love the red, white, and blue, be a fucking isolationist. And look at it through self-interested lenses, just like you did, brother Michael. This is not good for us. And I've heard multiple geopolitical analysts in recent weeks say that Israel is not an asset to the United States. It is a liability. Every American, guess what, guys? Every American since Israel started bombing on October 8th has a new target we all have a new target on our back. There is now, people know where those bombs came from. Everybody knows 2,000-pound bombs being dropped on those little children, blowing off their legs, made in Washington State. Everything. Apache helicopters. I think it's about those Boeing. I don't know. Made in the United States. We vote for the politicians who do that. They know this. They know this. And thank God, many Palestinians and Arabs are sophisticated enough to understand that not all Americans want to go to war with them. So they don't hate all Americans like that, but some do. Some do. And they actually do want to kill all Americans, or don't mind killing lots of Americans like Al-Qaeda said back in the day. Because of these atrocities against our people, we want to kill some Americans. And this is just Ron Paul again. Just everybody go look at Ron Paul, go listen to his speeches, go listen to everything he had to say in the 1990s and 2000s through and after 9/11 and the Iraq War. Everything he was saying at that time applies exactly as it does now, and should be applied to this situation right now. And you might notice, everyone, that the people who are opposed to a ceasefire, who are pro-Israel, damn near every one of them, guess what, supported the Iraq War. Not a coincidence. And by the way, why should we be, why aren't all those people discredited already? Shouldn't we just be like, oh yeah, he supported the Iraq War, we don't need to listen to him on foreign policy? Yeah, it's so get this, man. So we've got U.S. warship. I don't know if it's a battleship. Is it an aircraft carrier? Yeah, is it an aircraft carrier in the Red Sea?
Mm-hmm.
There's a carrier. I know there's carriers in the Med, but I don't. Anyway, aircraft carrier in the Red Sea, and aircraft carriers in the Mediterranean, off the coast of Israel and Gaza, in response to dudes on motorcycles and paragliders with AK-47s and some grenade launchers in running shoes, that shooting up kibbutzim full of hippies, shooting up villages full of hippies. We have aircraft carriers to deal with that, huh? Okay. Guess how useful an aircraft carrier is in dealing with Hamas militarily. Not at all, unless you just want to bomb all of Gaza. Then it's great at that. But anything short of that, it's absolutely useless. It's like a non sequitur to put an aircraft carrier next to Gaza. What's that going to do? Unless the Marines on board the aircraft carrier disembark and invade Gaza. So like short of like World War II scenarios here, it's totally irrelevant. But what it is, though, and now there's 4 of them, I think, in the region, 4 carriers. Isn't that right? It went from 2 to 4, I think, at one point. Anyway, and also these are groups, though. Each carrier group, I think, is like 5 or 6 or 7 ships. So what are we talking about? 20 fucking naval warships all around there. Where they are now. Guess where they are now. They're all in range of Iran's. What happened?
Oh, yeah. You froze for a second, but we're back. Yeah.
Okay. I was like in the middle of like preaching. I had my arms up.
Yeah.
They're all in range of Iran's missiles now. They just now made all those men and women on those ships targets now. They're giant targets. An aircraft carrier? Guess what? They're really big and move really slowly. Not hard to hit with something. They're provoking war with Iran. We also know, this has been going on since I think the first week of the war in October. We're now finding all these people, all Americans are finding out there are still U.S. military bases in Iraq and Syria. What? Yeah, not only that, they're getting bombed nightly or shot at nightly by these militias, some of whom are totally tied to Iran, and some are not. Some are made up only of Shia militiamen who are basically soldiers from Iran or funded by Iran totally, and some are made up of Sunnis who are simply nationalists who want the United States out of their countries. And they're shooting at servicemen. And by the way, apparently there's a big cover-up about casualties at these bases, these U.S. bases, that the Walter Reed Hospital and other military hospitals in Germany are filling up now with soldiers who are at those bases in Iraq and Syria getting blown up every night. So we and they've shot back, of course. I think we've dropped bombs from bomber planes on Iranian positions in Iraq and Syria, I'm pretty sure. And but I know we fought back. I know the US has absolutely hit back and killed a lot of them. So we're totally at war with Iran, by the way. We've been at war with Iran, a hot war with Iran for 3 weeks now, 4 weeks, since the US started shooting back at those Iranian militias. And Hezbollah, we'll see. I mean, a lot of this is for Hezbollah. This is why Nasrallah, who's the head of Hezbollah, is so important. No matter what your position is, he's just a crucial thing because they have a serious army. They have a serious army with serious missiles that can absolutely hit Tel Aviv. And unlike Hamas, their missiles can do real damage. The Hamas missiles basically, or rockets, the only way you could get killed would be to have a direct hit right on your body to be killed by one. Their blast radius is like this big. It's nothing. But the Hezbollah missiles apparently are big time. And they have multiple launchers and they have multiple basically bases. They have like proper military bases all along the southern Lebanon border. And so if they do anything, although apparently like the people of Lebanon for good reason really do not want a war, having been in a horrific civil war for what was it, 20 years? 30 years, 25 years. But nonetheless, there is a major army with major capabilities right there on the, and the entire world is anti-Israel now, except for half the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, and 25 intellectuals on Twitter. You're all alone now, Israel. I mean, except for you got your daddy, the US government, but millennials, not millennials, Zoomers, do you see this? Like overwhelmingly are anti-Israel, or at least sympathetic to Palestinians, overwhelmingly. And as Nikki Haley said,
yeah, because of TikTok.
Yeah, because they get 17% more pro-Hamas every 30 minutes. Yeah. That she actually wrote that down or memorized that is quite something.
I do want to bring up Rand Paul just today brought up a bill to withdraw troops from Syria and vote on the military authorization for some there. And it got voted down, 13 to 84. And I mean, it's a valiant attempt. It's better than what we're getting in the House, but
13. Yeah. All Republicans? No.
Who voted? I don't know the breakdown.
No, actually,
it was kind of bipartisan, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I'm trying to think who are the decent anti-war senators. There basically aren't any. What's his face? Chris Murphy, Connecticut. I bet he voted for it. He's good on this stuff.
Yeah, Rand Paul was citing those drone strikes that you're saying, like we're putting our troops in the line of fire in a conflict that has no actual authorization.
My favorite stuff, which is like that's the standard American, and this goes for like pundits too, I'm thinking of Eli Lake in particular, getting outraged that the Iranians are shooting missiles at our men and our bases. And if we need to send a message that any attack on America will get you killed. And it's like, yeah, how dare those Arabs surround our military bases with themselves? Like, what the fuck? It's a military occupation, an invasion. What? We have no right to be there whatsoever. They have every right to annihilate those bases. They have every right to bomb them to smithereens, as the United States would do if another country, like invaded and built a military base inside the United States from which they launched operations against our people. Oh yeah, no, we would be outraged about, fighting back against that. American parochialism, man. Well, if it weren't, it's just so fucking stupid. But it's so what's the word? It's like narcissistic, culturally narcissistic.
Rand Paul brought up that we're also getting into confrontations with Turkey, like what happened in September. Yeah, they bombed Kurdish forces. Yeah, and we returned fire by shooting down an armed Turkish drone. So we're fighting a war against a NATO ally as like a side project with our work in Syria.
So one of the things to keep an eye on is Erdogan in Turkey, because he has a very large military, a military that could absolutely wipe out Israel if they went to war with Israel. Not that that's necessarily in the cards right now, but everyone noticed that Erdogan had some of the most fiery rhetoric against Israel after October 7th. We also know that Erdogan...
Didn't he literally say your days are numbered?
Did he?
I think he did. Yeah, I think we reported that. Yeah, he literally said your days are numbered if you keep behaving like this. Yeah.
So we also know that Erdogan's a very, very ambitious man. When I took Turkish Air to Greece, this is like 6 years ago, they had a map on the magazine, the airline magazine, Turkish Air magazine. They had a map of all of their routes, and it's amazing. Everyone should go. I think it's still around. Go look online for the Turkish Air route map. It's basically every city in the whole world. Every single flight goes from every city in the world to Istanbul and back. Istanbul is the hub for the entire world. To go anywhere else, you have to go literally through Istanbul. And I just looked at that, and Erdogan, it's a state-owned airline. I looked at that map. I thought, oh man, this Erdogan cat, he has some ambitions. I'm not saying he wants global domination, but he might want some domination, some regional domination, and the Ottoman legacy, it's very attractive to Turks. They have an imperial past that's not even that old. So they have there is an imperialist impulse within Turkish culture. For most people, that's weird. The idea of like, oh, we should rule other people in other regions. But, there are some places where there have been imperialists, and Turkey's one of them. And not that long ago, just a little more than 100 years ago, right? There was an Ottoman Empire. And in fact, they controlled Palestine, didn't they? They controlled Palestine before the Brits kicked them out during World War I. So I don't know much about Turkish politics, but I know that much, that all those pieces of evidence would suggest that there is at least some possibility of Erdogan doing something. But again, all these reasons, not to mention Assad, Israel and the United States spent how many? 8 years killing hundreds of thousands of people in Syria to get rid of Assad. That was Israel's project, by the way. They basically got the US to do this for them to protect Israel. Guess what, guys? They killed 300,000 people, but Assad's still there. And he's still an anti-Zionist. In Jordan, you have, yes, a very compliant king, basically, but you have, 2 million or 3 million Palestinians living there, right there, seething with rage. You should see the demonstrations in Amman in Jordan are the most intense that I've ever seen. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people just packed together in this inner city, chanting in unison. And it's just like, you feel decades of rage just coming out of them. It's unreal. And they're right there. They're right next door to the West Bank and Israel. So if I lived in Israel, I mean, things are good. I checked out the Tel Aviv feed. You can do that on Instagram to see what's coming from Tel Aviv. Every post that comes from Tel Aviv, raw, real time. And 19 out of 20 posts or more were about people at the beach, people showing off their six-pack abs, people, pictures of their lunch, family pictures, all the stuff on Instagram, and almost nothing political, nothing about the war, nothing about Palestine or anything. It's just typical like living. It looks fun. Tel Aviv looks like I'd love to go there. It looks really fun. So I understand why they're probably complacent, and I'm not saying Israel's going down anytime soon, but they are very, very isolated, and more people hate them than ever before in their history. by a lot. And there are a lot of people who were like me, who are just sort of non-Zionist 7 weeks ago. And I've heard a lot of people say this, like, we just weren't advocating for the state of Israel, didn't want to support it, but we didn't take a position really on it one way or the other. Now it's a matter of survival for all of us, I think. Yeah, the Third World War may very well start because of those people, that state. It made us into an anti-Zionist.
Yeah.
Like, you have to be. I think everyone needs to be at this point. It's just for self-preservation for everybody, including and mostly Jews, for God's sake. Well, after Palestinians, I would say Jews are the ones who are harmed the most by the existence of the state of Israel.
As we wrap up here, I want to bring up the one big domestic issue everybody was talking about was George Santos, the Brazilian drag queen in the House of Representatives, getting ousted, being the 6th member in United States history to be expelled. I think this points to how ineffective the Republican majority has been. That this is literally all that they've been able to accomplish.
Remember the red wave?
Yeah.
That I was predicting? Yep. We were wrong. Well, we got a red trickle.
Well, what do we have to show for it? They got the majority and they got their oversight, but what do we have to show for it?
We got Jim Jordan and Jim Comer's hearings, which were good, very good and very useful. Definitely moved the ball forward on important things, but that's all we got. No legislation.
Yeah, just
of course. Yeah,
some things said on the record for us journalists to know.
Real important stuff. Yeah, no, for sure. About COVID, Wuhan. I guess they haven't really gone after the election yet. J6th, sort of back and forth, but yeah, I mean, especially, the COVID stuff, Wuhan, and then FBI, all that stuff, weaponization, great stuff. Yeah, don't you think? I mean, that's a major, and that's what I mostly wanted too, by the way, just to defend myself, which is the most important thing here. What I was saying was, when we get a Republican majority, we're going to get all these investigations of these things that are completely secret, that are ultra important, like how did the COVID virus start, right? So I think, and we got a lot of that. We could have had more, and we still will have more, but I mean, I thought the best stuff I was hoping for, we have mostly gotten, actually.
I think people are too politically isolated in their silos to where it doesn't matter how much truth gets out in committees. If it doesn't dissipate through the proper channels, it doesn't mean anything substantially. And if you don't have substantial victories, like, let's say, Biden getting charged or indicted or what's impeached, or if you don't have like actual substantial policy accomplishments, like the funding of the FBI or certain member, like Christopher Wray being fired, or actual villainous bureaucrats being expelled from their jobs, then it doesn't mean anything really. It'll just be business as usual, and us who are right will just be yelling till we're blue in the face until the end of time.
I don't know. I think some real material, tangible progress has been made, because, I mean, even though the bioweapons thing has faded even from our program, it's not gone forever. I mean, we're not done with that. That'll come back once we find out more stuff. And, it never became the hot issue I hoped it would be. But still, many millions and millions and millions of people knew about the U.S. bioweapons program from this. They knew that they now know that they didn't know that it existed. They didn't know that Fauci and the NIH were in the Wuhan lab. They didn't know that the U.S. has bioweapons labs all over the world. They do now. Not everybody, not even most Americans, but a large enough number of people know that stuff, that the next time there's a virus with a weird origin, guess what? I think it'll be way easier for us to say, hey, I have a feeling we should check the bioweapons labs first when we're trying to figure out where it came from.
Oh, and
I
there was a ban on gain of function research that got passed because of that.
Well, Obama did it
Yeah.
back in the day. Yeah. And then they and then what Fauci basically did an end around it.
I think that got reinstated after all the stuff came
Yeah,
out.
yeah. Oh no, for sure. Yeah. But I mean, that's the least of it. Again, I just think in other words, there's no way they can get away with this again. Like if there's another leak from a lab, they're fucked. I mean, so I will bet you anything. I'll bet you anything that security at all those bioweapons labs with the top category number, I think it's a 1. There's a category. Sam Husseini knows this. I'll bet you every one of those labs has had major renovations of their security and safety protocols. I'm sure. But I mean, well, they need to be abolished, but that's the next step. Because there's going to be another leak. Those things, they've had leaks all along. I mean, and the next time there's a leak, we're going to have a movement to shut them down entirely. So
George Santos, American hero, villain. You have a take on him?
So I have a soft spot in my heart for any queen, and he's just a classic New Yorican queen, and I love that shit. But he's kind of a nasty guy. I don't like him. Is it a victory? Like what was it about? It was just ethics shit. I don't care.
It was an investigation into how he spent, it might have been campaign money, but congressional funds on a house in the Hamptons and massages and OnlyFans accounts.
Right. Like, okay, so what? I mean, what if he had the perfect politics and policies, according to someone, what if he agreed? What if he was going to be like a dogged fighter for everything you believe in Congress, but he stole campaign money to pay for his OnlyFans subs? I mean, who cares? It's sort of back to the old machine politics question, Do you really care about corruption in that way? And why? Or that kind of corruption versus what the state does, different kind of corruption.
You're also overturning the results of a democratic election without a conviction.
That too.
Yeah.
That too. You're also persecuting a queen.
Yeah. And I see him as being scapegoated for all the corruption in Congress. Like he's just so brazenly hilarious that if you get rid of him and you feel like you've done a good job and you feel like you're better than him, when really you're committing crimes on a much larger scale because you have the ability to keep your composure.
Right. Classic tactic by the powers that be. No doubt about it. Yeah. Well, good luck, George, out there. I don't know what he's going to do now, but
also, if you watch any SNL, they have a ham-fisted impression of George Santos where they just they have the Asian gay guy just be George Santos and they say, "Oh, George Santos," and just the mention of his name gets a laugh. But George Santos himself is way funnier than any impression could ever be.
Yeah. I'm thinking, I don't know how good his game is, but I would love to see him on RuPaul's Drag Race.
Yeah.
And I think that would be the perfect next career move for him. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't that be amazing? And he could be sort of political if he wanted to.
Dude, a Republican exiled drag queen.
Boom. There you go. I love it. There's hope for him. There's hope for all queens. All right, man. Thank you. So we're going to go to Unregistered Live and hang out. It's an hour and a half Zoom meeting, basically, with us. If you want to hang out with us, go to patreon.com/unregistered right there and join at any level. And the URL you can click on. I posted it today, and we'll be at the meeting, chilling with the peoples. Thank you, my brother. Thank you for your cynicism. It's a service to humanity.
Yeah.
It actually is. I think it actually is. Mm-hmm. So thank you. Ironically. All right, man. Peace.
For sure. Peace.